Welcome back to Rising. Lindsey, what's in your lens today?
Let's talk about these tariffs. This was a big moment, not just for President Trump, but for the balance of power in this country. In a 6-3 ruling, the Supreme Court struck down President Trump's sweeping global tariff, saying he overstepped his authority under a 1977 emergency law that doesn't even mention tariffs. Chief Justice John G. Roberts Jr. wrote the majority opinion, joined by Justices Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Amy Coney Barrett, and Neil M. Gorsuch, including 2 conservatives appointed by President Trump himself. That's really significant. For much of his second term, the court has handed the president a majority of wins on immigration, executive power, and agency authority. But this time, the justices drew a line. They said Congress, not the president, controls trade. President Trump responded by praising only Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Brett Kavanaugh, who dissented. But he lashed out at the majority. Take a look.
They're just being fools and lapdogs for the rhinos and the radical left Democrats, and not that this should have anything at all to do with it. They're very unpatriotic and disloyal to our Constitution.
Now, you would think a ruling like this might prompt a recalibration. Instead, within hours, the president announced a new across-the-board 10% tariff, citing a different statute, Section 122 of the 1974 Trade Act, and signaled he probably will go even further. Now, the fact is, as my friend Robbie always points out, tariffs are taxes. And while they're often framed as punishing foreign countries, American importers pay them first. Since last year, more than $200 billion has been collected. Now at least $100 billion, possibly $133 billion, could actually have to be refunded. Trade lawyers say that process could take months, even years, involving Customs and Border Protection and the U.S. Court of International Trade. Justice Kavanaugh himself warned the refund effort could be a mess. Beyond the legal drama, the economic fallout has been real. Markets have been whipsawed, shifting by tariff threats. Businesses can't plan. Allies feel pressured. Trade deals negotiated just months ago are suddenly completely in question. And there's a potential $1 trillion hole in the federal budget because tariff revenue was helping offset Trump's recent tax cuts. And while Trump is doubling down, Democrats are seeing an opportunity here. They're already centering affordability in their midterm messaging, and this ruling gives them a fresh argument that the president's tariff strategy created chaos, raised costs, and most importantly, bypassed Congress. Even some Republicans, including Senator Mitch McConnell, called the president's approach illegal and welcomed this court's decision. So this wasn't just a trade ruling, it was a constitutional one. The Supreme Court showed independence. The president showed defiance. And the rest of us are left watching an economy and economic strategy that keeps shifting under our feet. It might be time for the base to tell the president, nobody wants this.
Well, I have nothing to disagree with you here. I oppose the tariffs too, and more importantly, they're not constitutional. The president did not have the authority to do this. I know that frustrates him very much, but I'll just say, look, if this is such a good idea to do these tariffs, well, that option is available to the president and is still available. The Republicans have a majority of Congress. Just pass a law that implements the tariffs or directly prescribes him the authority to do this using the specific language, then that would be fine. They won't do it because Republicans in Congress don't actually support these tariffs. Some of them do, but not enough of them to get it passed. They just won't admit that because they don't want mean old President Trump yelling at them and they don't want to appear to go against him. But good number of Senate Republicans, not rhinos, know that it was conservative, free market ideology has been opposed to tariffs for the longest time. It is Trump who's an outlier on this. Most conservatism has never been. Tariffs are just taxes. They're taxes on the American people. They're just raising the price of things American people pay for. So it's the mechanism is different, but it's no different than Trump saying we should increase sales tax on everybody without any trade-off. I'm fine with having more sales tax and less income tax, but this is just we're leaving taxes the way they are and adding an additional sales tax. That is what Trump has done with these tariffs. The power to tax originates with Congress, not with the president. So the Supreme Court totally reasonably and correctly said, So sorry, if you want to tax the American people, you have to go to Congress and ask Congress to raise this tax on American people. That's it. It's not more complicated than that. Trump thinks it's such a good idea. Get his Republicans to get on board with it. They won't do it because they know, and he should know, that taxing the American people is very unpopular, and nobody wants it done, and good riddance.
We saw last week when Trump's key players in his staff, like Susie Wiles, all gathered together for a meeting around strategy about what the plan is. Yeah, there's a conversation about affordability and how to really hone in on that message, as opposed to what's happening right now in the public is a lot about the SAVE Act and who's voting. But there's a real conversation. They know that they have to get back the people believing that they can control this economy. And so the president should have taken this moment as maybe an opportunity to pause, knowing that the direct implications of this, even though we haven't seen them yet and not 100% sure how it will look, could be that things get lower priced for Americans. So going into the midterms, you could look good as the party in charge if tariffs are not high, making prices.
If I was Trump, I would try to spin this as, well, look, we accomplished our goal with the tariffs because we worked out all these great trade deals and the rest of the world's taking us more seriously and they achieved their goal diplomatically. This is how I would spin it. And so we don't need them anymore anyway. So
but what he's doing now is just
all done.
He just enforced a different law and a different tariff. And so he's still going to make things more expensive for the average American.
The authority.
Right, but that, again, we know what tariffs do to small business owners, big business owners, and then the cost gets passed to us. We saw that. That's why Costco is suing the administration, saying they absorb some of the costs, they want their money back. And even governors, I believe it was J.B. Pritzker that put out a memo online, like, you need to pay back about X million dollars to people that live in my state because it's how much we paid. And he said, past due on the notice. So people kind of want their money back that they spent over the last few months that costs more. And so the president has to really think about the fact that the Supreme Court, which a lot of people have criticized for leaning in his favor, is dissenting. You know,
this is not because the idea that the Supreme Court was just backing up whatever Trump wanted was a false liberal notion to begin with. The Supreme Court, it's 9 people who are independent thinkers. There are a lot of decisions you don't hear about very much. They don't get reported on that are 9-0. There's plenty of times where they all of them come together to rule against the federal government.
Like Clarence Thomas and a couple of them just do whatever Trump wants to do. Because if you are truly a conservative and you also want to go by the law that's by the letter in the book, then you would know that these tariffs were illegal, and you also would say this doesn't align with my conservative values.
Well, Kavanaugh took the position and Clarence Thomas took the position that law was Congress giving the president this exact power to do tariffs in an emergency. That's the position they took. The majority did not agree that this emergency authorization law had anything to do with tariffs and said you couldn't do that. So there's still, I see why the people on the other side ruled that way. It's not because they want to rubber stamp whatever the president wants to do. They thought he had been permitted by Congress to do this because it's an emergency. The majority was not persuaded by that, said, well, what's the emergency? No one can point to an emergency here. And that it didn't mention tariffs, and so they can't do that.
The immediate response of adding a new tariff under a new law that he has the jurisdiction, I guess, to do, as well as calling the Supreme Court lapdogs, is going to hurt him in the midterms. That's not a good strategy forward, and I don't understand what he expects to come out of that.
Yelled at the Supreme Court during his
State of the Union
address.
He said, Julian Manchester, our Hill reporter, asked him if the Supreme Court justices are still invited to the State of the Union tomorrow, and he said, barely. That was Trump's response. So,
well, we'll see which ones show up. What's in your lens today, Lindsey?
We're talking about the State of the Union, baby. Let's get to it. Democrats are walking into the State of the Union with a real dilemma. How do you oppose Donald Trump without making him the center of your resistance? Now, last year, the images were unforgettable. Members holding signs, lawmakers walking out mid-speech. You remember Al Green standing, pointing his cane towards the president, heckling him, and ultimately being escorted out. It was dramatic. It was viral. It also became the whole story. This year, Democratic leadership wants something different. What Hakeem Jeffries is calling, quote, silent defiance. Fewer theatrics, more discipline, but unity, that's still a work in progress. Some Democrats aren't even going at all. Here's what Senator Ruben Gallego said.
Right now, this country is hurting, whether it's what's happening in Minnesota, whether it's our families that are just trying to make every dollar stretch longer, whether it's veterans, trying to make sure that their benefits aren't being cut by this administration. There's a lot of work to be done, and it's not going to happen in that chamber for 2 hours when the president's just going to be using, that bully pulpit as a way to just, push further and further his agenda.
Now, Connecticut Representative Jim Himes is also skipping it, saying, quote, "I've never missed the State of the Union, but I'm sick of Trump's lies, boasts, and attacks on our democracy. This Tuesday, I'll be at the People's State of the Union with Move On and Midas Touch, standing up for healthcare, affordability, and decency." Many Democrats are leading counter-programming on the National Mall, the People's State of the Union, hosted by Katie Fain and Joy Reid, organized by Midas Touch and Move On, Civic Action. Others will attend the State of the Swamp, featuring lawmakers like Ron Wyden, Eric Swalwell, alongside celebrities like Robert De Niro and Don Lemon. Meanwhile, inside the chamber, some members are going to sit quietly. Others, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, might skip it altogether. And a few could test leadership's restraint or request for restraint. Here's the bigger question. When everyone is resisting in their own varied ways, is the message amplified or diluted? Democrats are fresh off reassuring election wins and are trying to mobilize every part of their coalition ahead of the midterms. That means progressives, moderates, suburban voters, young activists, all of it. But when the strategy splinters, the optics can look like too many cooks in the kitchen. Which brings us to the official response. Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger will deliver it. She's a moderate who won her race by the largest margin for a Democrat in Virginia in 6 decades. That choice is not accidental. It suggests perhaps that party leaders may believe the path forward isn't louder resistance, it may be broader appeal. Not viral moments, but suburban margins. Not confrontation, but contrast. The Democratic Party is still deciding whether its future runs through its loudest voices or its most electable ones. This State of the Union won't just test their opposition to Trump, it will test whether they can present a clear, unified vision of what comes next. So when I saw 20 different events, I started getting stressed out. I was like, okay, this is happening at the Capitol because we're going to be following it all, but it's like a lot. It's like, what's the plan, guys? Because this is the exact problem. You're getting an alley-oop in a basketball game because Trump has dropped the ball with the economy. He got a huge loss on tariffs, teeing him up for this speech right tonight. And you guys are running on an affordability message. What's the plan? And they can't decide whether they want to just go in the AOC direction, Mamdani direction, skip the whole thing and meet him where he's at with the disrespect like Newsom is doing, or put somebody like Abigail Spanberger forward and say, we're going to be calm, cool, and collected. And I try to talk to people out there that are Democratic voters about what they like. I've been asking people that I know vote Democrat recently. And a lot of people don't want the theatrics. They really want somebody middle. As much as I'm entertained by Newsom, they're like, I just want somebody who's just going to bring us back to a little bit of normalcy.
Abigail Spanberger, moderate, you say?
Yes, that's what a lot of people have described her as.
Well, that is what a lot of people have described
And you're
her
just going to
as.
point
I
to
agree
one
with
instance
that.
of what she did with what? Go ahead. Say the one thing that she did that makes her not moderate, please.
May I?
I know. Go ahead.
Yes, immediately told the police to stop cooperating with immigration enforcement whatsoever and in all circumstances. Typical blue state governance. Not going to do any immigration enforcement whatsoever. The previous orders had been not to, arrest every Latino-looking person on site, but there are violent criminals who are also legal immigrants being held. They'll alert the national authorities. Seems like a perfectly sane and moderate policy to me. It was the policy of her predecessor, immediately undone by this so-called moderate Abigail Spanberger.
So when you see all this variety of options out there, luckily the Democrats have not very obviously locked into one strategy. Does that make you happy to see? I mean, does it make you happy in a way that you think that benefits the Republicans?
Not based on what the Democratic Party is doing, or Trump, or I don't care.
I mean,
these things are like very performative episodes that matter to us arch politico people, and many Americans will watch, and then we'll comment on the effectiveness of the zingers, of the delivery, and then we'll argue about policy as we do, and then we'll go on with our lives. It's kind of I don't think.
But a lot of people that do the rebuttals
for anyone.
A lot of people that do their rebuttals end up extremely relevant, if you notice, in like the next presidency, like Marco Rubio.
Yeah, it seems to me for the most part, people who've done the rebuttals are the people who the party expects to be a big deal, and then it often doesn't work out for them that way.
So Marco Rubio got lucky in that regard.
Yeah, I think he's the
Yeah, that kitchen.
Katie Britt.
Yeah, that was not
She's
good.
Republicans themselves have turned on her. Republicans don't like her anymore. They think she's too moderate for whatever state she's in, Alabama. She's in a southern, deeply red state where you could have a very conservative, and she's only a little conservative. That's what Republicans are telling me.
My concern for people that are looking for
Alabama. Where's Katie Britt? Someone tell me. Alabama. I got it right. Cool. Go ahead.
My concern for people that are looking for a more moderate, civil-minded, like somebody who's just nice and neat, works across the aisle, is like, that's again like that when they go low, we go high situation. Like President Trump is exactly where he's at. So don't we need somebody to meet him right there as you fight this battle? Even though you're not going to go against President Trump, you're going against a coalition of people, for the most part, that have supported him almost blindly.
If you want to find a moderate Democratic person, someone who compromises with Republicans and works across the aisles, we have basically exactly one of those people. His name is John Fetterman, and Democrats hate him.
Can't be.
They loathe him. Democratic partisans, hate and loathe him. Independents quite like him. Republicans quite like him. He's gotten more popular in Pennsylvania over time, but Democratic primary activist type people despise him. But he is exactly as he is the moderate Democrat.
Okay, how many Republicans are in Congress that y'all have called rhinos over and over again because they vote one way or the other?
Well,
so John Fetterman is the exact example of a rhino Democrat. You know what I mean? Or a dino. You know, he's the same thing. He literally just goes against for the biggest legislation. He'll be like on the other side of the aisle, and it's like, well, you were part of like the 1 or 2 votes we needed to make this thing go, and you say no just because. Why? Maybe you're trying to represent the people of your community, which is a noble thing to do, but also you're not in lockstep with your party.
Of all the swing states, so he has to be extremely. He's in a state that Donald Trump beat Kamala Harris in. So if he's a Dem who wants to survive there, he's got to be pretty down the middle, or even maybe a little right of center.
Well, maybe
it's savvy politics.
Since he's still accepted as a Democrat, maybe Republicans should take a clue about how to accept people that are a little bit like Marjorie Taylor Greene or somebody who doesn't agree with current
they accept
policy.
people like, Susan Collins is no Republican, MAGA conservatives ideal of a Republican, but we know, the Republicans know that's the best that you're going to do in the state of Maine. And so there's nobody primarying her, thank goodness. And if they did, Donald Trump would call them up and tell them to go jump off a bridge immediately, because the only way to hold that seat is for Susan Collins to hold it. So there's a little bit of strategery. Not always. They could very well cost themselves in the Southwest, seems to be where Republican primary voters are determined to, shoot themselves in the foot. Lindsey, what's in your lens today?
Let's talk about it. So we ask a lot of federal law enforcement. We give them badges, guns, the authority to detain, arrest, and in some cases, use deadly force. At the very least, we owe the public and the officers themselves is a rigorous constitutional training. Right now, that's exactly what's being called into question inside ICE. Ryan Schwenk, a former ICE lawyer turned instructor at the federal law enforcement training centers in Georgia, resigned and is now speaking out as a whistleblower. He says what's happening behind the scenes is not just bureaucratic streamlining, it's just flat out dangerous.
Secretive orders to teach new cadets to violate the Constitution by entering homes without a judicial warrant. For the last 5 months, I watched ICE dismantle the training program, cutting 240 hours of vital classes from a 584-hour program.
That's not a small trim. Internal documents released by Senate Democrats show that a July 2025 syllabus required 584 hours over 72 days. A February syllabus shows roughly 336 hours over 42 days. That's about a 40% reduction in training. Schwenk says it's not just about the hours, it's about what exactly is being removed.
Classes that teach the Constitution, our legal system, firearms training, the use of force, lawful arrests, proper detention, and the limits of officers' authority. For example, they ceased all of the legal instructions regarding use of force.
The documents show certain courses no longer listed, including the use of force simulation training, immigration law instruction, and exams about judgment pistol shooting, and an exam called determined removability, which tests whether agents can properly assess if someone is legally allowed to be in the United States at all. Recruits now reportedly complete just 9 practical exams to graduate, compared to 25 in most previous years. This is all happening amid a massive hiring surge. After a planned $75 billion infusion over 4 years, ICE says it has hired more than 12,000 new officers, which is more than doubling its force, with thousands more projected to graduate by the end of September. When you scale that fast, something has to give. The question is whether it should be constitutional guardrails. The administration disputes these claims. The DHS spokesperson said, quote, "Our officers receive extensive firearm training, are taught de-escalation tactics, and receive 4th and 5th Amendment comprehensive instruction." Schwenk counters that. Standards have been condensed in ways the public doesn't fully understand, he says. Over the last year, federal immigration operations have already resulted in deadly encounters involving American citizens, including the shootings of Renee Nicole Good and Alex Preddy during enforcement actions in Minneapolis. In both cases, there were conflicting accounts about what happened, questions about the level of threat, and scrutiny over how force was used. When immigration agents are deployed into major American cities, often in fast-moving, tense environments, the margin for error is razor thin. These aren't routine paperwork stops. These are high-stakes encounters where decisions are made in seconds and consequences last forever. That's why training on constitutional limits, use of force, and lawful arrests isn't optional. It's foundational. If internal documents show fewer hours, fewer exams, and fewer simulations, while the agency more than doubles in size, that should concern everyone, regardless of where they stand on immigration policy. This isn't about being pro or anti-immigration enforcement. It's about whether the people enforcing the law are deeply trained in the actual law. Speed cannot outrun the Constitution. If we're going to expand power, we have to expand preparation. Anything less puts everyone, officers and civilians alike, at risk. So that whistleblower report really threw me off, to see him saying, directly contradicting. I mean, we know the Senate has reported that the hours of training has diminished a lot, but when he went into detail as one of the training officers, saying that this is what we've cut, how to react in these dire situations, and some of the training about use of force, I think that that should be concerning across the board, especially because the incidents that we don't want to see happen, no matter where you stand on looking at specifically the Renee Good incident and saying, well, she shouldn't have, that all put to the side, looking at Alex Preddy, did both people need to die? Was use of force warranted? That's the exact conversation that the investigation is looking into. And I think that they're lacking training in these ways would be very problematic as we think about how we're enforcing immigration.
Yeah, I mean, what do you want me to say? I think there should be ample training, adequate training of ICE officers and other police officers. I'm not at all against training. I'm for more training. These are people we trust to take their lives into their own hands, our lives. They are authorized to use deadly force. The state, the police, they have a monopoly on the legitimate use of non-defensive force. They can use, they can initiate force against you, lethal force, violence. No one else can do that. That requires trust, high degree of trust being placed in them, and so they should be adequately trained to do that. I have no idea what the precise number of hours are necessary. I don't need to be overtrained, but I don't, more than the administration does now is fine with me. That, of course, requires spending more money on police services, not less. So, you know, defund the police means, or abolish the police, that means cut training for what police we do have. So I don't know why that was ever a winning Democratic slogan, but no, I favor more training for immigration officers and anyone else. They should be properly trained. They should not shoot first, ask questions later. We don't want to see things like Renee Good, Alex Preddy, even if they are even if they could be justified given what happened in the situation. We don't want those things to become more frequent. So yeah, train them. I'm all for training.
And
I don't think you'd find anyone who would disagree.
Well, I think the fast nature of it obviously is coming from the administration down, from immigration officials. Like hiring 12,000 new ICE agents is because he wants to make this a core issue for himself, even though the, I guess, dramatic instances of criminals running rampant throughout our country don't match the urgency of speed and fast tracking people through necessary training. If 40% of what usually was training for 25 years, a precedent, is cut in half, just to fast track 12,000 new ICE agents, like what is the real goal? Having people that are like, it's like throwing up a home and then things start to break. Like, okay, we need the foundational structure to be intact so that people can go out and do a good job, whether you agree with ICE or not. It's just the fact that there's a pressure coming from the administration and federal officials to get this done quickly so that more ICE agents can obviously enact what the president sees as the vision, or his team, Tom Homan, sees as the vision for immigration enforcement. And I think that that should be a directive that, yes, we do want to get people trained if we believe this is the way forward, but also not quickly in the wrong way. We want to make sure we're getting trained people adequately, no matter if it takes a little bit longer. What's the rush?
Yeah, I train them. I mean, this is not controversial. Is anyone arguing against this? Are people going, no, train them less?
Well, I think no one's speaking about it, and I think even Republicans should call for it to make sure this is not happening. I mean, we have a whistleblower for a reason. He's saying no one's doing anything, and he's getting these direct orders from immigration officials, Department of Homeland Security, to train or cut training off in these ways, and he doesn't think it's right. And this was brought forward by Senate Democrats. So where are the Republicans saying, wait, we need to look into this because we care about ICE and we care about them, this implementation strategy so specifically. So where are these people calling for the right training? I mean, you said that Democrats are always saying abolish ICE, abolish the police.
They want to eliminate
okay, so
entirely.
The Republicans who want to continue to keep ICE exactly as is should be calling for appropriate training so that they can at least be well trained as they do the job that Republicans are asking them to do.
Right, but Democrats don't think they should do this job at all. So are Democrats going to appropriate more funding for training of ICE officers? Obviously not.
Well, the whole
They're not. They don't even
Democratic
vote
Party
to
is not on the
fund
same page about that. We
Homeland
talked about
Security.
that. This is the Hakeem Jeffries issue right now. He was on Joy Reid's podcast and didn't say he wanted to abolish ICE, and that was a big issue. So I don't think if you talk about the
unless it's
leadership
hacking.
of the Democratic Party,
Right, the leadership is out of touch with their base. Their base wants defund the police, abolish ICE, don't enforce immigration, and that's what the base wants. It's not what the majority of the American people want, which is why the Democrats are in this difficult position where they have to appease the far left radicals who constitute the most energized part of their party, but leadership doesn't want to give them what they want. So,
well, Hakeem Jeffries is in the actual position. So at the end of the day, he's one of the people that makes the decision, and he's calling for some transparency now with other Democrats that are saying, look, if we're going to continue to have ICE, because I never said abolish them, can we at least train them properly? So I would like to hear more Republicans saying the same thing.
Lindsey, what is in it?
Let's talk about it. Let's start with what matters most. When a political activist is murdered on a college campus, the American people expect the FBI to move immediately. No delays, no distractions, just action, right? Now, there are serious allegations that in the aftermath of the assassination of Charlie Kirk at the Utah University, the FBI's elite shooting reconstruction team was delayed in getting to the scene, not because they were not ready, but because of a pilot shortage tied to FBI Director Kash Patel's use of Bureau aircraft. Senator Dick Durbin, according to him, a whistleblower told his office that FBI pilots who had flown Patel hit federally mandated flight hour limits, triggering required FAA rest periods. That meant the team tasked with analyzing and reconstructing the shooting scene couldn't deploy for at least a day. Reuters has reported that it could not independently verify those claims. The FBI has strongly denied the allegations, with spokesperson Ben Williamson calling them, quote, ridiculous, and saying Director Patel was on official travel at the time. But here's why this matters. The FBI director is required, for security reasons, to travel on government aircraft, even for personal trips, and must reimburse the government at the cost of a commercial flight. That's not new. What is new is the scrutiny over how frequently those planes are being used and whether those decisions are affecting operations. Durbin alleges this isn't isolated as a concern. He also points to the response to the Brown University shooting, claiming Patel's decision to put the hostage rescue team on standby instead of activating closer regional SWAT teams effectively tied up Bureau aircraft and forced other responders to drive overnight. The FBI disputes that characterization, noting the incident was initially state-led and saying resources were not delayed because of directed travel. So at this point, we have competing narratives. On one side, a senior senator citing whistleblower claims of operational strain and delayed deployments. On the other side, the Bureau flatly rejecting the accusations and defending Patel's travel as official and appropriate. But let's just zoom out for a second. The head of the FBI sets the tone. And according to Durbin, Patel once told field offices, quote, if you have golf, hockey, fishing, or hunting, and beautiful sights, you're going to see a lot of me. Maybe that was a joke. Maybe it wasn't. But leadership optics do matter, especially when you're overseeing time-sensitive, life and death investigations. This is not about beer in an Olympic locker room or optics about the Olympics. It's about whether taxpayer-funded resources are being managed in a way that prioritizes mission first every single time. If the perception exists that travel decisions could delay justice in a murder case, that's not partisan. That's a governance issue. The Government Accountability Office and the Justice Department's Inspector General are now being asked to look into it. That's appropriate. At the end of the day, this is simple. Leadership is about judgment. And when you run the nation's top law enforcement agency, judgment isn't a side issue, it's the whole job. What say you?
Well, look, I was also kind of critical of Kash Patel yesterday with the Olympics meeting with the team. Not that he met with the team, that's fine. He's a big hockey fan, but should he really be flying the jet to Italy? But as you noted in your radar, he has to fly for security reasons on the jet. So, I don't think he's obligated to give up all personal travel to do this job.
But he must be in Italy for hockey to celebrate.
In an ideal world, he would just, if he really wants to go to the Olympics, he would just fly commercial, but he's not allowed to do that. So he's got to take the jet. Yeah, he has to pay for it himself.
But they're now saying that was an official trip. So he's blurring the lines he said that they were over there for work. And I'm not mad about somebody in the high power position celebrating with people that have won an achievement of a lifetime. I care about the fact that we're now having examples, and this is on top of the fact that Kash Patel has been the face of many times dropping the ball. So when he comes out and speaks about stuff, even about telling us the wrong information in regards to Charlie Kirk, he's been the face of that, boldly and wrongly. And I think the fact that now we know that his personal travel may or may not, according to this whistleblower, have tied up flights and official aircraft from getting to places that require urgency, that's problematic, tied to the fact that he's not doing a great job. I think we talked about
it may be problematic, and he's not doing a good job sometimes with the optics of the job. I don't know, they captured the Charlie Kirk killer pretty quickly in my book. I didn't love the things he said in the wake of the shooting of the Capitol officers, of the guard in the Capitol, excuse me. I didn't like. He also said the thing about not bringing a gun to a protest. That was wrong. He's the Epstein thing. We're going to talk about Epstein later, so we should not get into this yet again.
He wanted a certain size jacket, I believe, before he stepped off the plane one time.
Embarrassing.
Yeah, he's doing a lot of stuff that really doesn't sit well, that you should just take his word for it. I just think that also leadership requires you to have at least appear like you had it together. He's overseeing, and simultaneously, while the Olympics, and there may be an official job for him over there, are some things that are happening that are in the national spotlight. I know you don't want to talk about Epstein, but now this...
No, I just don't want to talk about it right now.
Right now, we're going to talk about it later. But even the fact that the Nancy Guthrie case, whether people think it should be in the national spotlight the way it is or not, it is here.
It should be in the national spotlight, certainly.
Right, but I'm saying the amount of missing cases. Some people argue there's so much we could use these same resources for. This is a high-profile instance.
Well, it's a high-profile person.
And the fact that we're here and the FBI has decided to be part of this investigation, and this woman, unfortunately, is still missing, and he's, again, in Italy for official business. It all doesn't look good. And your job to me in this position is to first appear to be organized in getting to some solution and then also do the job well. And I think that is some of the biggest concern that Kash Patel, he doesn't seem like he even cares about being correct or looking like he has it all together. And particularly, and I know we're going to talk about Epstein later, but he also has this big thing that's covering the national news every single day about the fact that his agency has redacted a lot and turned it over to the FBI and is not doing any explaining about why this is getting to Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna so sloppily, but he's in Italy. Like, he has the time. On top of that, he's taking personal trips that may or may not be affecting the actual job being done.
Well, they may or may not. They also just might not be affecting how the job's being done. I don't think it's the redactions are the redactions. They try to go through millions of pages of documents, and it
takes a while. They're super busy.
There were names that were properly redacted because they were people who had nothing to do with Epstein. And Ro Khanna read their names on the House floor without waiting a moment to find out whether they had anything to do with Epstein. It turned out they hadn't. So that wasn't an FBI screw-up. That was a Ro Khanna screw-up. He said there's no evidence of people that Epstein procured girls for those people. And having looked through the files myself, I now conclude that he was correct in saying that. So I'm actually more frustrated with Pam Bondi than I am with Kash Patel because she introduced error into what she was talking. She made it sound like she did have that document. It did exist. I think it's clear it doesn't.
I think you have more leniency for Kash Patel than most people, and I just want to understand why. If somebody's not doing that great of a job, I think we should just be fairly
that's subjective
saying
that he's not doing that great of a job. I don't know.
You'd give it if you had to give him A through F, you'd give him A plus
based on what the things he says on TV.
You're the FBI director, and you're incorrect about information.
I'd have to look at how many crimes are being what is the our anecdotes are anecdotes. Is the FBI closing fewer cases or more cases than last year? Have they started more investigations, fewer or more than last year? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I couldn't just render a verdict based on the fact that he wanted a jacket that was too big. That's stupid, but it's also stupid.
I wish you had this much leniency for Jasmine Crockett. That would be nice.
Well, she's an elected representative.
No, I wish you had that much leniency for her.
Lindsay, what's in your lens today?
I couldn't believe that Paramount thing. First
I
of all.
know.
We'll get into that. Mm-hmm. Here's the headline. As the Washington Post first reported, pro-Trump activists who say they're coordinating with the White House are circulating a draft executive order urging President Trump to declare a national emergency over the 2020 election, based on a claim that China interfered and used that emergency to take sweeping control over how Americans vote in the midterms. Let's slow that down. I know that was a lot. The draft would empower a president to ban mail-in voting and voting machines, arguing they're vulnerable to foreign interference. But U.S. intelligence reviews in 2021 concluded that while China considered influence efforts, it did not carry them out. There's no credible evidence that foreign interference altered the 2020 outcome at all. And here's the constitutional reality. The Elections Clause explicitly gives states, not the president, authority over how elections are run. Article 1, Section 4 is clear. States set the rules. Congress can step in. The president has no role. As Michael McNulty, a policy director for pro-democracy group Issue 1 put it, quote, "The Constitution is absolutely clear. The president does not have legal authority to unilaterally change election rules. Any attempt by the White House to do so would contradict the Constitution and would almost certainly be struck down by the courts." But this isn't happening in a vacuum. So for months, there's been a broader drive to cast doubt on the legitimacy of the 2026 midterms. In his State of the Union, the president falsely claimed that the, quote, only way Democrats get elected is to cheat. He's pushing the SAVE Act in Congress and has openly floated acting alone if lawmakers don't comply. At the same time, we've seen federal law enforcement step into election spaces in ways that raise alarms, including an FBI raid on election offices in Fulton County, Georgia. Intelligence Chief Tulsi Gabbard was present, despite her office having no formal role in election administration. The message to local officials feels unmistakable. If we don't like the outcome of an election, we may come looking. And here's what's often that gets left out of the conversation about this, quote, massive fraud. The Heritage Foundation, the right-wing think tank famous for pulling together the controversial Project 2025, tracked election fraud cases over 25 years in some cases. And in the state of Arizona, for example, they found a rate of 0.0000845% of fraud with no election outcome altered. Both parties have lawyers inside these counting rooms. To believe widespread fraud exists, you have to believe armies of Republican and Democratic attorneys are either incompetent or complicit. That's not reality. A recent Washington Post ABC News poll shows a majority of Americans, including independents, oppose a federal takeover of election administration. This moment is bigger than one executive order. It's about whether we normalize the idea that a president can declare an emergency whenever he doesn't trust the outcome of an election. That's not election security, that's executive overreach. Now, facts matter, the Constitution matters, and confidence in our election depends actually on leaders respecting both, even when the results do not go their way. So I want to talk about this because I think when I saw this, and obviously the president has an option to take up this suggested executive order, but I think it starts to fall in line with the conversations that we've seen recently around the SAVE Act or around the way that the election has all this fraud with migrants that came here illegally voting. And the numbers just don't support that, even in the Heritage Foundation's past research.
So I think there are a couple of different things happening here. One, the SAVE Act in and of itself includes voter identification, and over 80% of Americans support having ID to be able to vote and making sure you are a U.S. citizen to vote. Now, there are plenty of states run by Democrats all across the country that allow non-citizens to vote. And for that, you undermine election integrity. Now, I take your point and I agree. There's no proof of widespread fraud. And in 2020, though, there were plenty of states, Wisconsin included, that altered or changed their election laws in real time without consent from elected bodies to put their hands on the scale of the election. That I actually fully believe, especially in Wisconsin when it came to getting ballots out to infirmed individuals who couldn't come in. That was a massive overreach. The president loves to conflate all of it to make it as confusing as possible. And right now, this is just outside chatter, though. This is just other people saying, oh, we're talking to the White House. Look at what we're doing. The White House isn't putting this out. Yes, the president continues to say what he always says, and I don't agree with it, that Democrats cheat to win. Democrats have altered rules, as I pointed out in Wisconsin in 2020, to try and, I believe in that case, to make it easier for other people to vote as a Democrat, not as a Republican. So should we have election integrity and security? Absolutely. We should have full faith and confidence, but that doesn't mean that the federal government should come in, because what works for a New York voting system is not the same as what's going to work for an Oklahoma voter.
I think the scare or the alarming part to me is just recently on the anniversary of January 6th, we still have a president that, and Robbie's argument is always, he genuinely believes that he won that election. But we have a president that's misleading on government sites what actually happened that day. And,
what do you mean?
He put up a site for January 6th anniversary, basically saying that he was the true winner of the election. It was a government site. And when he pardoned all the people from January 6th, he gave them almost a pat on the back, like, yes, you were in service, honoring something that we know to be true. He's never conceded the actual election. And so when you don't, acknowledge that our voting systems and the way that our country votes works and that these results are true, even though there's been plenty of results in the past that people have waited to come forward and concede or gotten frustrated about. I mean, we remember like the many times in our history where it's been down to the needle. I just think the president at this point, now that we're in 2026, he's won again, fair and square, should acknowledge that he didn't win in 2020.
I have heard tape before of the president acknowledging that he didn't win in 2020. I have heard that before. Now, it's not his top line, and it's certainly not one people continue to pull up from him, but it's a fact. He knows Joe Biden served a term, and that's why he's president again. But it is okay to ask questions about the administration of elections. And I have heard Democrats on other channels and other networks say, oh, well, they're going to send in poll watchers now. That is not a boogeyman. And I feel like Democrats are taking some easy things that are meant to secure elections and making them into Republican boogeymans when they don't need to be. Poll watchers, that's been done for decades by campaigns on both sides of the aisle. We don't need to pretend that those hysterics are real. And we certainly don't need to pretend that because I'm a woman and I got married, then now I'm too dumb to be able to change my name to go vote. And that's what Democrats continue to espouse.
Well, I think that there's more nuance to that conversation.
I don't know
right?
how many times
if they're asking you to have a passport and they're asking you to have a birth certificate, tell me, do you know where your birth certificate is?
I do.
Because I'm not sure that I do.
I know where my birth certificate is, and I had to change my social security, my name on my social security number to be able want to be able to register my driver's license. Like, there are steps you have to take to legally change your name that don't preclude the opportunity to vote.
But also, if you're asking for a passport and someone doesn't have their birth certificate, then what? Are you paying the $60 and covering that fee to make sure that passports become attainable to the 10% of people, according to the census, that are living underneath the poverty line?
And I think states can absolutely figure out how to adjudicate that process to make sure people have forms of identification. But identification, you can't rent a car, you can't cash a check, you can't go into a hotel room, you can't travel without identification. It is not so unfathomable that pulling out a form of ID that says, this is me, I get to cast this vote, will somehow upend and make elections less secure.